pop culture's leading artists explore the stories that defined their genres. This is AMC Visionaries.
The Marvel Universe is pervasive, a gigantic part of pop culture.
Marvel is a powerhouse today, but most people don't realize they almost didn't exist.
People think that Stan Lee just came on the scene and created these great characters, not realizing he had already been there in the industry for a couple of decades.
Start to unravel the history and realize that it all began with Stan Lee going, just don't want to do this, almost walking away from comics.
I had wanted to quit working there. I wanted to do a lot of things that were different.
Marvel had a lot of luck in its corner as far as timing.
If you didn't have Stan Lee and Jack Kirby in the right place at the right time, we wouldn't be talking about Marvel Comics today.
When you think about Stan Lee and Jack Kirby writing all of these comic books that have now become these iconic movies, it's just amazing.
Stan and Jack coming together was a monumental turn in the history of pop culture that nobody saw coming. There wasn't anything that would lead you to think that these guys are going to change the world.
Wonder Woman is awesome. What I cared about the most was trying to make a movie true to the character that is lasted for 75 years for a reason. But for many years, I've been saying there is a massive following of Wonder Woman, and it was baffling to me that she, the biggest female superhero in history, was not on screen.
We think today of seeing an action heroine in a movie as a big risk. But can you imagine back in 1941 at the start of World War II, how risky it was to be encouraging women to be powerful? This still astounds me that I never thought to explore earlier, well, who was it that made this character? Why does she exist?
When I learned a little bit about the creators, it made me love the comic even more. It definitely wasn't the conventional.
If you look at the history of Wonder Woman, especially in the 40s, there was so much of these three people put into that character.
Their life journey inspired a comic book fantasy. That had to have been pretty spectacular for all three of them.
They created one of the most iconic characters of our time. But what strikes me is the salaciousness of his personal life.
I know the real story, and that stunned me. I said, "Excuse me?"
Superheroes and Superman. They are one and the same.
There are no other superheroes without Superman. He's the first.
An extraordinary being with extraordinary powers.
That was it. The whole world of comic books changed.
Superman is really the all-father of superheroes. He is the Odin from which all else springs forward.
See, without Superman, there's no Marvel or DC. No billion-dollar blockbusters.
That logo is one of the three most recognizable symbols on the planet. And it stands shoulder to shoulder with the crucifix and the Jewish star. Like, that's madness, man.
Superman became a worldwide phenomenon. And he was created by two working-class kids from Cleveland, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster.
Superman, he's for justice. It's kind of ironic that there was a great injustice done to his creators.
Siegel and Shuster lost everything. And just like Superman, they demanded justice.
New York City is the heart and soul of comic books.
That's where these guys that drew it grew up. That's where they created these characters.
Instead of having them live in a fictional place, I plunked them right down in New York City.
Whatever happens in New York is going to affect comic books whether you want it to or not.
What is the comic book industry supposed to do when you have a serious moral and political challenge in New York City?
9/11 changed New York City and comic books forever.
I read a lot of comic books when I was a kid. There were no black superheroes. None of them looked like me.
As a young black kid, we would look at the representations that we had and sort of be ashamed.
The comic books today, they reflect the people who create them. People who are in charge. We're mostly white males.
At the time, I said, if I want a world where there's black superheroes, we're gonna have to create some black superheroes.
Every black kid who's ever wanted to do comics has had that idea.
I told him, the only way we're going to see it is if we do it. Milestone Comics was heroes for everybody.
They were very, very innovative and ahead of their time.
It was definitely revolutionary. The political act was forming the company and having 4 black guys in charge. We broke a lot of barriers. There's a price to be paid for doing things differently. So, you want the real story of Milestone? Okay, here we go.
When I was 12 years old, I'm reading comics all hours of the day. Comics were hugely important to me. I started noticing these names in the books. There are artists behind these books, and they're all super talented, and I gotta follow these guys.
Late 80s, early 90s, man, it was the artist's medium, and artists ruled the roost. And all of the best artists were collected at Marvel.
You get your Mark Silvestri, your Eric Larson, Jim Valentino, but there were 3 undeniable superstars at the time: Rob Liefeld, Todd McFarlane, and Jim Lee. Those 3 guys were drawing comics unlike they had been drawn up until that point, making the page turns so much more exciting as you would go through these books.
We broke the mold of very static storytelling. I remember the day that I heard Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana and the strum of the guitar and the entire sound of that song and how different it was and powerful and commanding. That's what we were doing on the page. We had a very new sound in comics.
I was a huge Marvel fan growing up, and so that was my dream, to work at Marvel and to work on the X-Men.
You have to figure out how to get people to see you, and the way to do it is style.
Look at how Todd McFarlane can draw Spider-Man in this completely dynamic way that nobody else has before. And you're talking about a character that's been around for decades. And suddenly Todd McFarlane was putting his knees over his ears. Spider-Man's, not Todd McFarlane's. And it was dynamic.
McFarlane, Liefeld, and Lee were really coming up strong. Their work was being recognized, and they were very important to the company. They sold a lot of books.
Most days at the New York Stock Exchange, the joint is jumping. Marvel Comics has enjoyed some pretty heroic sales of late, with an average of 8.7 million comics a month.
Todd had just relaunched Spider-Man, one of the best-selling comics of all time. Jim Lee had just done X-Men, which I think is the best-selling comic book of all time. Rob had relaunched X-Force.
We'd had the greatest financial success and the greatest unit sales in the history of comics. I don't think that will ever be broken.
If one's goal is to break into one of the top 2 comic book companies and work on the book that you loved as a kid, it felt pretty good. I felt like it was a pretty big achievement.
I'd always wanted to work for Marvel Comics since I was a kid, buying their books from the liquor store.
I never took it for granted. Every day was exciting. I went in on day 1 hoping I'd work for Marvel for 25 years. I just found out that I wasn't wired that way.
I think that everybody watching now knows why we call this series A Visit with the Comic Book Greats.
The The problem with comics at the time is that DC and Marvel kind of had a monopoly on what creators could do. If you didn't want to work at Marvel anymore, you could kind of cross the street and go work at DC, but if you didn't want to work with either of them, there weren't really a lot of options for you.
I created characters for Marvel, like Deadpool, Cable, X-Force, that are still going strong today. You know when you're in the zone. I was in the zone. But suddenly I was hearing from Marvel, you know, well, maybe we should go this way or that way. I'm like, whoa, wait. Now I'm not driving the car anymore.
You know, there's nobody that's indispensable. They can't be. But the characters are the most indispensable part. That's what the business was built on.
So the book I'm doing is now selling more than any book in the country. When I first walked into the office years ago, when it was in the top 20, they're going, help us! And then I take it to the top, I set records, and now they're going, we'll take over now, Todd. And because it's too popular.
In my world, the characters have to come first. And, you know, Spider-Man has to do certain things. And he can't do certain things. We used to tell advertisers and merchandisers that Spider-Man will never disappoint you. He'll always do what he's supposed to do.
So, you go, I don't think this elevator goes any higher here. I've reached the top of my opportunities here.
I had read the stories, and the one that had the biggest impact was that they had taken advantage of Jack Kirby. Jack the King Kirby. That was his nickname, ladies and gentlemen.
Jack Kirby actually co-created 90% of the Marvel Universe. We don't want to be the ones that create a kingdom of characters and then feel unhappy with the way we were treated.
I was on the phone with both Eric, but mostly Rob Liefeld, a lot. Todd told me once, oh, you're calling me again? You call me more than my mother. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to take that, but I'm gonna keep talking. The germ of the idea was as simple as Rob just wanted to do his own stuff. Any way he saw fit. Same with Eric, same with myself.
I decided I was going to publish my own comic, and it was called The Executioners. I had a big emphasis on the X in Executioners.
He'd taken out a one-page ad in the Comic Buyer's Guide. It was just a bunch of characters that he had come up with.
So excited, I wrote my check, I bought my ad, I'm going to get a full-page, fold-out ad in the Comics Buyer's Guide, which the Comics Buyer's Guide was a huge weekly comic book newspaper.
And Marvel flipped out. They were giving him angry phone calls, and at that point, it was sort of blood in the water. You know, we could see like, oh, these guys are scared, and that probably more than anything was the genesis of Image Comics.
Culture's leading artists explore the stories that defined their genres. This is AMC Visionaries.